Are you still unclear about what waiting for the invitation really means for projectors? Well, don't worry, I'm here to help you get clear on what that really means for you and how this can actually lead you towards living your most empowered life as a projector. And by the end of this video, you'll get the answers to the following questions. What does wait for the invitation really mean? When does this strategy apply? What does an invitation look like? How do you even go about waiting for the invitation? And lastly, how can you start experimenting with the projector strategy? So if you enjoy this video and want to continue to deepen your understanding of human design, I would be so grateful if you could show me some love, hit that like button, and subscribe to my channel. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Crystal Alferrero. I'm founder of the Human Design Academy, and I help people like yourselves understand your unique energetic blueprint through the human design system. So when I learned that I was a projector, I honestly had mixed feelings, mixed reactions to it. You know, on one hand, it felt like this huge sense of relief to know that, first of all, no, I wasn't alone in this, capacity to not keep up with the world around me. And on the other hand, I was also kind of lost and thought like, what do you mean I have to wait for the invitation? Especially as someone who was extremely impatient. I was very much living in my conditioning to be a generator, to be a manifester. And I was someone that would always initiate and try to push through. I worked in a very competitive working environment when I did work in the 9-to-5. And this is what led me to just feeling miserable and feeling just completely unnecessarily stressed and unnecessarily burnt out. And honestly, I wasn't really modeled anything differently to achieve my goals. This is the only way that I knew how. And I feel like so many people go through the same thing. And this is what ends up leading a lot of us projectors to that road to burnout, right? And just in general, there were so many misconceptions I had about this strategy, and it took me a little while to really surrender and experiment and actually wait for the invitation rather than rationalize every reason why I shouldn't. And when I did finally surrender to it, I realized just how empowering and honestly freeing and life-changing it really was for me, which is why I truly do invite you to watch and join me in this experiment if you haven't done so already. And yeah, I guess that's it for this intro. Let's just go ahead and dive in. So what does wait for the invitation really mean? So as you know, the projector strategy is to wait for the invitation. And in reality, the strategy is actually to wait for recognition and the invitation, because there's an element of recognition that's needed first in order to receive the invitation. And this basically means waiting to be recognized first and given an invitation before sharing gifts and energy with others and before initiating things. So what does it mean to be recognized? Well, it means to be recognized for your gifts, your insights, your expertise, your energy, or some kind of value by another person. They have to see something in you that they want for themselves. And the reason why waiting for the invitation is so important is because projectors are conditioned to constantly initiate and hustle to make things happen. But when they constantly initiate, in other words, when they're trying to control things and trying to force things to happen, they end up using their energy in an inefficient and unproductive way and often end up feeling burnt out, right? So they just face a lot of unnecessary resistance and rejection when they go about this kind of path or this kind of method of approaching things. So the strategy of waiting for the invitation is really just to prevent them from constantly initiating from this place of fear, urgency, and scarcity. And it encourages them to really just take that empowered, inspired, and aligned action, which is where things get to be easier. There's this really common fear with not just projectors, with everyone, that if we are not constantly doing things, or if we're not taking actions towards where we want to be, and I mean actions by brute force and just kind of forcing and controlling, then we're not going to get to where we want to be. We're not going to be successful. We're not going to, be fulfilled. But what really happens and what projectors need to learn is that it's in this void, it's in this space that our auras do the talking for us. Projector auras are designed to attract that recognition, attract that invitation. So really what I like to say in human design and when I have my readings with my projector clients is that, if you didn't have something in your chart, if you don't have that consistent sacral energy, it's not because you lack something. It's not because there's something wrong with you. It's because you literally don't need it. You didn't need it to fulfill the thing that you came here to fulfill. You don't need it to be efficient, right? Projectors are here to be efficient. And so leaning into this strategy is really what helps you leverage your energy in the most efficient and effective way for you. And most importantly, it's through the right invitations that they're offered the energy that they need to carry something through. So waiting for the right invitations gives projectors energy similar to how response gives generators access to the life force energy that they need to complete a task or a project. Now, when does a strategy apply? Well, for projectors, living their strategy doesn't mean waiting for an invitation to even breathe and move and just do things that you love to do on a day-to-day basis, but the invitation generally applies to the 4 major life decisions, which include the invitation to love, an invitation to a career or business opportunity, an invitation to enter any kind of bond or relationship, friendship, and then lastly, an invitation to a place to live. And again, specifically where there's an energetic exchange for their gifts or their talents or their energy. And my personal rule of thumb from my own journey is that if there's no, energetic exchange involved with another person or party, you don't necessarily have to stand there and wait for the invitation to do something that you want to do. For example, those inner callings to start a solo business or to move solo to a new location or to start a new hobby. I like to see these as invitations from the soul. And in these particular cases, I just check in with my authority to discern if something is correct for me to do or not. Personally, as a projector, I've moved and I've started businesses without necessarily waiting for that external invitation, and they both ended up being the best decisions of my life. Maybe it would have been different if starting a business or moving was pending on another person, then yes, I probably would have waited. But in this case, it wasn't. And I followed what my soul was calling me to do, what my authority was telling me and pulling me to do. So what does an invitation look like? Well, just to recap what an invitation looks like, an invitation is essentially someone calling for your gifts, for your energy. In other words, that specific thing that they recognize you for. And an invitation can take many different forms. So it can definitely be a physical invitation for a specific opportunity at a specific event, but it can also look like receiving a job or interview offer. It can look like receiving a DM or an email to collaborate. It can be asked formally or informally to enter a personal or business relationship. It can also look like, just being asked to share your opinion or your advice on something. Lastly, it can also be an energetic invitation where you feel seen and recognized by the other person. And this is what creates that space for you to do the inviting yourself. So let's just say, for example, you're talking to someone that you just met and you really, really click with them. You feel that there's chemistry there, and you might feel pulled and gravitated towards inviting them towards something, especially in the case where it's like projector and projector relationships. In other words, in this case, there's a two-way energetic exchange for your energy. And in receiving invitations, it's also really important to be selective about which invitations you say yes to. In other words, not all invitations are going to be correct for you. You really need to lean into your authority to help you discern which invitations are actually correct for you, because not all of them will be, and that is okay. Next, what does waiting really mean? So let's talk about what waiting really means and debunk this idea that waiting is this inactive, powerless state that means doing nothing, because many projectors feel disempowered when they're told to wait, or they feel this inner conflict with their strategy. And that's the thing, your strategy is not necessarily going to be what feels the most natural for you, especially if you're someone that grew up around a lot of generators and around a lot of other people whose types are not, or strategy is not to wait for the invitation. So waiting is actually an active and receptive state of awareness, and most of all, preparation. So preparing yourself to receive informations. For example, preparing your nervous system, your energy, your skills and your expertise by mastering systems, nourishing your inner world and also your self-trust and confidence so that you magnetize the right recognition and you're ready to receive invitations when they come. And the universe is funny in that way because it usually gives you what you're able to handle. So you get the right invitations when you're ready to receive them. You know, when projectors get really, really honest with themselves, a lot of the time when they're not getting the right invitations or they're just not getting invitations, it's not because they are not worthy of them, right? It just means that they were not ready in some way to receive them. And those are two totally different things. Sometimes not being ready simply means that you're just not in the right environment or surrounded by the right people who do recognize you. And you just need to tap into your personal authority to guide you to where you're really meant to be. And I mean, there's so many other ways that you can potentially look at it. But essentially, this waiting period is really this time for you to prepare to nourish your mind, body, and soul so that the right opportunities and invitations can come your way. So it can be helpful to consider, who do you need to become to receive a particular invitation? What qualities do you need to embody? What do you need to integrate, release, or let go of so that you can step into the highest expression of yourself? What do you need to learn, or what skills do you need to master to guide your clients, your people to success? And what can you do to share your talents from a place of passion and detach from any outcomes? And last but not least, what can you do to start recognizing yourself right now? Because in order to see that recognition show up in our external world, we need to change ourselves from the inside first. And one of the biggest challenges for projectors, like I mentioned before, is that, you know, they've been conditioned to think that if we don't take forceful action, then nothing will happen. But the truth is that the universe has this natural flow and things are always happening. Things are always moving, even if we aren't physically doing, right? This is what projectors can discover when they can learn to embody and surrender to their strategy. You know, they learn how to tap into that innate magnetism, to let their aura do the talking and the attracting and the magnetizing. And this is how they can become empowered projectors and really embrace being in this world in the way that they were designed to. So for all my projectors, just let me know down in the chat how you feel about waiting for the invitation. Next, what do you even do while you're waiting? So we're going to talk about the 6 things that you can do while you're waiting instead of trying to push and force and use that brute force to achieve your goals. And it all starts with number 1, mastering a system or systems. I cannot emphasize this enough for projectors. And what this really means is really prioritizing your education and immersing yourself in learning and what lights you up so that you can up-level your skills. This can simply even look like mastering and focusing on your craft. And then from here, taking that knowledge and that expertise and sharing it from a place of passion, which is important to do without expectations, without an agenda, which is what we're going to talk about next. So number 2, create value without an agenda. So this is really what we call the lighthouse effect. And what this means is just doing your thing, shining your light, sharing that knowledge and that expertise you have from this place of passion. And from here, you naturally become seen and recognized for what you have to offer. So if you're a business owner, it can be very, very important to just focus on learning and creative goals or impact goals rather than being fixated on those monetary goals, especially when you're just starting out. This was the key for me in my business, and it made that whole process so much more enjoyable. I was operating from this place of joy and fulfillment rather than this place of scarcity and lack. So really just immersing yourself in that process and just having fun with it. Number 3 is to take care of your physical vessel. And this doesn't necessarily mean to become obsessive about some training and diet regimen, but it does mean nourishing yourself, getting adequate sleep, eating nutritious foods, and getting in some daily movement. It also means being attuned to your body and listening to your body and understanding when you need to take a break. One of my human design teachers, Lavina Archers, used this analogy that I really liked and resonated with in one of her videos on projector success secrets, which I can leave in the description for you down below. And that's to take care of yourself like a pro athlete, because I used to play a lot of sports growing up, and I always had so much energy when I was taking care of myself. I notice this so much now, especially. So projectors can really increase their energetic capacity by simply taking care of their physical vessels that take you to where you need to be. The next thing you're going to want to do is to nurture your emotional, mental, and spiritual health. And really what this means is nurturing your mind and your soul and taking care of all of your different selves. So your emotional self, your mental self, your spiritual self. And this is what helps you increase your capacity to receive and show up as your authentic self. And you are most magnetic and magnetizing and attractive as your authentic self, right? And this can look like going to therapy or having a breath work and meditation practice. It can look like doing somatic work. It can even look like having a journaling practice to connect to your purpose and your higher self. You might even want to consider, what baggage is weighing you down, or what self-limiting beliefs do you need to release to create more energetic space? Because the more baggage that you can release, the more space you have to receive. So number 5 is decluttering your space or workflow. Sometimes we accumulate so many things, whether that's tangible physical items or even intangible things, and this can actually block our capacity to receive and to handle more. So just in terms of physical clutter, if you have a lot of physical clutter in your space, it can make you feel more sluggish, or it can make you less productive. Even if we look at your to-do list, sometimes we tend to over prioritize everything and it blocks us from moving forward. It keeps us stuck. So decluttering your workflow can look like identifying the mundane things in your to-do list that aren't moving you forward, and maybe decluttering or backlogging this from your to-dos and just reprioritizing the things that are actually going to bring you closer to your results, or closer to where you need to be. So going back to that Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, that 20% of the things that you do actually bring you 80% of that happiness, 80% of that fulfillment, 80% of those results. So applying that to your actual workflow is very, very helpful so that you don't spread yourself too thin. So you really want to identify what's working for you and what's not, so that you can redirect this energy towards what is. Last but not least, number 6 is to find joy and playfulness in the process, to simply detach yourself from obsessing over the end goal and just enjoying it, enjoying that process, doing more things that light you up, and really allowing yourself and your mind to be present and consumed in the now. So for example, this can be just going out with friends and family, traveling, doing art, or any other hobby that's unrelated to your work. Because it's when you are actually present that you don't feel like you're missing something. You don't feel like something is so far away from your goals. It's all about being and finding that joy in the now. So that wraps up the 6 things that you're going to want to do when you're waiting for the invitation. So hopefully by now it's a lot more clear to you what waiting for the invitation means and how you can start waiting for that invitation. But if you're someone that still hasn't really started experimenting and you don't know where to start, what I found is that wherever you are experiencing resistance in your life, this is an invitation or an opportunity to start experimenting with your strategy. So whether that resistance be in the form of your not self theme of bitterness, or just general exhaustion where you might feel drained or unfulfilled or burnt out, these are signs or signals from your body's intelligence that something is off, something is out of alignment, right? This is an opportunity for you to look at this particular area a little bit deeper. So the first place that you're likely going to want to do, or the first place that you're going to want to start, is by identifying and bringing awareness to these areas where you are facing the most resistance. And for projectors, a huge source of resistance comes when they're trying to initiate and take action and force things to happen. And, this is what leads them to that exhaustion and that bitterness in their efforts, because they might not be able to keep up with the fast pace of the generators and manifestors around them energetically. This leads to them sometimes feeling like there's something wrong with them. And so this is one of the areas that you might want to look at. Another place of resistance can come up when they're trying to provide advice or guidance to people who haven't recognized them yet or haven't offered any invitation. So that feeling of bitterness can come up if they don't feel seen and heard. And it's likely in these areas or some variation of those two scenarios that you'll likely find an opportunity to take a step back and to start to wait and respond to things before acting immediately, before jumping straight into action. So the two questions that you're going to want to ask yourself or your clients to get started with experimentation are, number one, where am I facing the most resistance? In other words, that bitterness, exhaustion, or burnout in my life. And then number two, in these areas where you're initiating before being invited, how can you take a step back and lean into waiting for the invitation instead and follow what I had mentioned in this video. And it's when you identify this is where you'll want to get started. And if you've already been experimenting with your projector strategy, I'd love if you could share in the comments about your own experiment so far. So we've now come to the end of this video, but if you're wanting to get that extra help to understand your strategy a bit more and how it actually applies to your life, I do offer one-to-one human design readings that include a 90-minute Zoom call. Plus, you get a customized 30-page human design blueprint for your own learning and reflection that you can always use as a resource guide. And I'll leave all of that information and a link for you in the description down below. And this brings me to the end of this episode where we answer the following questions. What does wait for the invitation really mean? When does the strategy apply? What does an invitation look like? How do you even go about waiting for the invitation? And lastly, how can you start experimenting with the projector strategy? So if you enjoyed this video, I would be so grateful if you could show me some love, hit that like button, and subscribe to continue learning more about the incredible human design system. So with that said, have an amazing day or evening wherever you are, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye.